Greetings and welcome to Sanctuary. Today we're talking about a few tips that I believe will be pretty interesting and useful for you and will greatly improve your experience in Diablo 4. Those tips are going to be, some of them are going to be specifically for druids and some of them are going to be basically for all classes. So I believe every single person watching is going to take something out of them. Now the first tip is going to be that you shouldn't really completely ignore the store because the store can sell pretty good items. Look at this. For instance, I got this for one of the monsters that I killed a couple of minutes ago. It's for level 80, but look at this. We have another amulet which has similar item power that you can buy from the store, which is going to refresh in 19 seconds, by the way. My point is, I'm desperately in a desperate need to change my amulet. I have very good aspect on it, but the amulet is from level 16. It's quite bad. So I need to have an ancestral amulet, and there is one specific affix that I really need, and this is cooldown reduction. This particular one has cooldown reduction, but all of the other 3 stats are pretty garbage to me and for what I'm currently using. So I don't know what to do in this situation. I'll definitely keep grinding, but at the end of the day, I also want to check the vendor, see what he has. Currently, there we go, another ancestral amulet. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work at this point because it doesn't give me the things that I require. Damage reduction while injured is good, but at the end of the day, again, I need to have cooldown reduction. Ultimately, I can just buy this one and start, enchanting until I get the cooldown reduction, but I don't think for this particular piece it is worth it. But once again, remember that it is always worth to check what the vendor has in store, not only when it comes to the amulets, but also when it comes to the weapons. You can see here, I have those specific weapons that are on sale. None of them is particularly good, but at the end of the day, once again, you can do that every hour. It doesn't cost you anything. Sometimes you can get a very, very good weapon or very good accessory out of those stores. Tip number 2 is associated with socketing. As you can see, I don't have a single ruby. Reason being, in my opinion, damage reduction is much more important than life. Of course, when you're talking about certain amount of damage reduction against certain amount of life. But at the end of the day, if you have been socketing all rubies, try to change it, try to socket those blue stones for additional damage reduction and check it for yourself whether it feels better. If you start actually testing yourself in Nightmare Dungeons, you're going to find out that damage reduction is absolutely a godlike stat, which leads me to the third tip. Do not underestimate damage reduction. Don't go all the way damage. Now, going all the way damage has its place. It's not completely worthless, but the more you progress in the game, the more you discover that you require actually 2 things. The first thing is not to get CC'd, so you're required to be unstoppable. This is the reason why my ultimate is so important. And the second thing is you should be able to take a lot of punishment without dying. So damage reduction works incredibly good late game. So early game, you can be perfectly fine. You shouldn't really invest that much in damage reduction, but the more you level up, the more you discover how important that stat is. Another tip for druids, offhands. They are useful, do not underestimate them. A lot of players just play with a 2-hand weapon and that's it. I'm going to play with a 2-hand weapon and that's it. I'm not going to even consider having an offhand. Now once again, playing with 2-handed weapon has its place. For instance, if you're running tornado build, you need to make sure that you reduce your spirit cost as much as possible. Does it make sense to imprint on a 2-handed weapon this particular aspect for Grizzly Rage? However, in my current situation, I'm using Shred, and I really require to have Grizzly Rage with lowest cooldown possible. So what can I do? Instead of having 2-handed weapon, I have offhand instead with a 1-handed weapon, and what this thing does is it gives me 10% cooldown reduction, which is actually huge. So it helps me to kind of survive dungeons without waiting 30 seconds to engage again because my ultimate is down. Remember, if my ultimate is down, that's a big deal because I can get pinned down, CC'd, frozen, stuff like this, I'm going to die. So do consider offhands. They are not completely worthless. In certain builds, they are actually must. Alright, so this tip is going to be pretty important because every single one of us has to complete those. As you can see, I'm currently working on mine because I'm being lazy. But at the end of the day, if you complete the Renown in all of the 5 zones, you're going to get 20 Paragon points, which is absolutely huge. So now the thing is, how do you do that? If you try to do it solo, that's going to be a huge mistake. The best way to do the Renown, at least when it comes to the side dungeons, is to go to, let's say, over tier 1. It doesn't really matter. All you need to do is to complete the dungeon, so doing it as fast as possible makes sense. So go to over tier 1, get in a group of 4. That's really important, and every single one of you can actually start clearing dungeons in 4 different zones of the current area. So at the end of the day, you clear the dungeons 4 times as fast compared to if you want to do it solo. So you need to remember that even if you are not in a dungeon, if somebody within your group completes a dungeon, you're going to get the aspect of the dungeon and you're going to get the renown points. So that's pretty important, and it's worth doing instead of going solo, which is going to be painful, trust me. Alright, the next tip is connected to the spirit. Basically, druid is a spirit hungry animal, so you need to make sure whatever you do, whatever build you do, you need to make sure that you have fixed the issue with the spirit generation. This is going to be the first thing you need to consider. Okay, I want to build a tornado build, or I want to build a shred build, or I want to do a pulverize build. How do I make sure that I don't run out of spirit? That's really important. The only viable build currently that doesn't really care about spirit is basically a build that relies on claw and on storm strike. It is the lightning claw build. It's pretty cool, by the way, but more or less that's the only build that doesn't care about spirit. Every single other one that I've known relies on spirit, so make sure you find a way before you even start considering this build. Make sure you find a way to fix the spirit issue. Alright, the next tip is pretty interesting because it concerns nightmare dungeons. You know, you unlock nightmare dungeons sooner or later and you start farm them. Now, what is the affix that you should avoid at any cost? There is one affix that I never do, because every single time when I try it, I failed miserably, and this is the resource burn. Look at this. Monster attacks from distance burn 16% of your primary resource. I already mentioned that spirit is a scarce resource. You need to find a way in your build to make sure that you don't run out of it. Now, if you're in a dungeon with this modifier inside of the dungeon, you will lose all of your spirit, which will render your build useless. So definitely ignore any single dungeon that has this modifier. You will not regret it. Alright guys, so these are going to be my tips for druid players. I hope you found them useful. If you did, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give me a like. If you didn't, don't worry about it. See you next time. Take care.
Perfect.